Welcome back to the Wish.com Fighter Weapons School. I'm your host, Squishface, a hack and a fraud, and I'm here to show you that the Gripen is actually not that good, and it really struggles against some of the planes in the game, and this is a very dynamic matchup, and I went out and I picked some random bozo in my Discord. We did 5 rounds, and you can just look at this. Look how much I am struggling, because he picked the F-16A, and I'm in the Gripen. No, it's not actually the case, so this is one of those matchups that I've done a lot of testing on, at least in sim. I don't play RB, so I can't really speak to it, but I've also kind of talked to the RB people, and the RB people say, yeah, this thing's kind of fucking busted to shit in like a way that's boring. And in sim, if you play it in a certain way, and the way that you play it is like extremely intuitive, it's like the most brainless way possible of angle your vertical line in your fucking cockpit towards the guy's tail, you more or less just kind of win against pretty much everything in the game that's not an F-16A. And even against the F-16A, he's going to struggle. Like, the F-16A has to play it well, and speaking of playing it well, so that people have context of like who the fuck is the guy in the background footage, it's Shezarade. He's one of the dudes from Wovi. He does a good bit of top tier jet dueling, and as far as like F-16A players go, he's one of the better ones I've seen in sim. Like, he knows how to do the rate speed thing and actually maintain energy, and he does all the sim dueling stuff like well. And I've seen him like face off against like the Korean dude, Sungho / Ace, and like, he's good. This is not like capping. This is like showing kind of like close to what you're gonna see for like quote unquote smart sim players. Smart, because I don't really consider myself one of the smarter ones, because I do tend to be a little bit more aggressive than I need to be, and I'm not really the person to raid around a lot. I just don't have the patience for it like 99% of the time. But even so, we're in the rate fight with the F-16A. This is the Nets, which is the Block 10. So that's the previously best turning flight model in the game. And if you paid attention to earlier on, we still got shots off. We still got shots on him. We just can't hit them because I can't aim worth a shit. And one of the limitations in sim that you don't have in RB is the distances matter a little bit more. Because in sim, you can't fucking shoot a guy at 800 meters like super duper reliably. Whereas in Air RB, it's kind of like, for at least for a good portion of the people, it's kind of like a free kill. So doing the rate speed thing in sim is a lot more viable and a lot less nuanced than it is in RB. But even so, going really aggressive and just pulling in for early shots is actually still a pretty productive strategy. But if you are looking around here, this is a point where we're almost in like a symmetrical 2-circle blah 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 turn rate position, whatnot. And because the land mass is here, I go a little bit further to the left, a little bit further to like what I'd call like the outside of the circle to not hit the ground. And this fight is over basically on fuel. He does get position, and we've done this one like more than once. Like, we've done all of these like fucking it probably like fucking 50 to 60 times at this point. Like, there's a lot of time that is went behind this, and I'm not really picking the best of the best or anything like that. Like, we did a lot of F-16A. We did a lot of F-16A on different days of the week just to see if like maybe one day we had a bad take where like, okay, I was playing like dog shit and he was playing good, and then I was playing like fucking I'm great as fuck and he was playing like dog shit. And we repeated that one enough. We repeated a bunch of these enough that we have some like more kind of like pretty, I would say, solid conclusions. Then the solid conclusion is that the Gripen basically does the same thing that the F-16A does. It's more or less a very similar flight performance envelope. It does pretty much the same for rate. I would argue that the Gripen is better in sim. It's also a lot easier to use. There's no risk of really like over AOAing anything. You don't really lose a lot of speed. So really, you're just kind of sitting there in your hand holding. What this means is that if you're in any plane that's not a Gripen and any plane that's not an F-16A, when you run into this thing in sim, you're going to be absolutely beating your dick off. You're going to want to throw your face into a fucking blender, because the other guy doesn't really have to do anything. He doesn't have to learn a lot. He doesn't have to learn about your plane. He doesn't have to really do anything besides intuitively like pull his nose towards your tail. And you're usually going to run out of energy. It's not like a traditional Delta Wing flight model. It's not like the Mirage 2000 where it does like funny AOA things where it kind of sits inside of you. It can be really annoying and really obnoxious. Like, no, this is an F-16A, more or less, with AIM-9Ms and TWS radar, which means that to me, it's a good plane. I don't hate the plane because I have to fight it. It's just, to me, it's rather flavorless. There's nothing really nuanced about it. Like when it comes to the new flight models, like I like the Su-27 the best, not because the plane itself is good, but because it has the most nuance to it. It does funny things, and because you can do funny things with it, you can really kind of throw people off. There's really no throwing people off with this thing. If you get to the merge with them, you just kind of win for free, which is, to me, a rather boring dynamic. Anyways, after F-16A duels, he did switch up to F-16C because we wanted to compare the old big bad, which is the F-16C, to the new one, just to see like how close they are and see if the F-16C has anything to really stand on. And the answer is not really. It can't really do shit. The F-16C is about 1,500 kilograms heavier than the F-16A. It's kind of a little fat bitch. It does carry the weight pretty well. The F-16 has a really good airframe to start with, so even though it loses some of its turn performance and whatnot, it still ends up being very competitive against like literally everything else in the game. But against the Gripen, it's just kind of not it. Which is I'm not gonna say is unfortunate because the F-16C fucking terrorized the whole entire game for the last patch, so kind of like fuck them. But at the same time, it just goes to show you that this plane can terrorize the whole entire patch for the foreseeable future with its 700 and some odd flares and just kind of having like auto immunity to being third party. The other thing about this plane is like this thing's fucking tiny as shit. Like I can't overstate how obnoxious and difficult this thing is to hit and sim. Where if you're in something like a flanker and you get like a gunshot on him, if he's not like literally stuffed in your nose, there's a good chance that like you just don't hit him. And that means that not only does this plane have the performance, it has like a level of forgiveness that just doesn't exist with something that's like the size of a city bus like the F-15 or the size of 3 city buses like the Su-27. This plane's incredibly forgiving. Like right there, you saw that he came in, he shot away some energy to get that shot, and he didn't hit. And because he didn't hit, he's just kind of helpless now. I'm just gonna like raid around him, and like I can't overstate how actual dog shit I am at rate fighting. I don't practice this. I don't know what the specific rate speed or any of that shit is for the Gripen. I just kind of angle the tail towards him, and he's gonna run himself out of energy. And this is a point here where he's going for an attack, and this is an attack that if he was an F-16A or if he was lower fuel, he could pull into that and we could go head on. But because the F-16C is fat and heavy, he can't do that. He doesn't have the nose authority to actually rip it around. And when Cesare plays the F-16s, he plays them in the manual flight control mode. So he plays them without the AOA limiter basically turned on, or with the thing that Gaijin is basically using as an AOA limiter, I should say, because there's probably some subtle nuances to it. But it means that the F-16s that we have in the game actually overperform their real-life flight models as far as like being able to point the nose at incredibly low speed. So even against like a fantasy F-16, our fantasy Gripen also just kind of does everything like basically better. The only place where the Gripen ends up being kind of like quote-unquote weak is once it gets to low speed, it doesn't throw its nose around nearly the same as something like an F-15A or something like an Su-27, the MiG-29, or even the F-16A. That is not really a weakness. It is not something that anybody is going to notice unless you get into like a very specific fight that is probably not going to fucking develop because of the way that this thing retains energy and because of this thing's like sustainable turn rate. Because what this thing does, because of the energy retention, it means that at any speed between like your high speed merge from like Mach 0.85 down to fucking 0 fucking miles per hour, if you're over pulling, you're still maintaining a pretty solid rate. It means that you have an initial turn of 30 degrees per second, and by the time you make, like, say for instance, you make a circle, by the time you make a circle, you're still going 25 degrees per second, and everything else that's in your opposition, if they try to match that, they're going to do the same thing. They're going to do 30 degrees per second, but by the time they get around, they're going to be doing basically, let's call it 15 degrees per second, because they're going to shit away all their speed. And this plane just doesn't really do that. And it means that even though this thing has a 0.9 thrust to weight ratio, that's not a weakness that is reliable to exploit. Like, I started this out here with too much speed. I came in with way too much fucking speed, didn't merge at the correct speed. He gets behind me, and after with a little bit of defensive, I am pretty easily outrating him. And you could tell because of like the contrails on his things, like, yes, he's overpulling, he's trying to pull me in. and I'm just going to match it. Like, you look at the contrails, and you look at what the other guy's doing, you can kind of match it, and you're fine. You're chilling. Every fight that you get into this thing, you're just straight fucking chilling, and like, there's nothing to learn. There's no like subtle nuances. Like, I don't understand how people like think that this plane is like anything other than like brain dead. Like, I don't understand how people like randomly pull fucking bozos from the Discord and go like F-15 versus Griffin, like, oh, this was a close fight. Like, there are some people that can make it a close fight, but if you play the Griffin like even half-assed correctly, it's not close at all. Like, right here, maybe if I air brake, maybe if I go super duper hard in the paint, I get to shoot at a tiny little speck that's 800 meters away, and then he just gets to freely rate away from me like it's nobody's business. And yes, someone in the comments will be like, well, actually, the optimal rate speed for the F-15 is 800 kph. It's like, okay, cool, I don't care. Done this fight like enough times, we've switched off. It's not competitive. It just does not work all that well. There are some things, there are aspects, there are times when you can look at the guy and he makes a fucking mistake. You're like, okay, cool, I can actually work with this. But really, the type of mistakes the Griffin has to make are like super duper like fucking egregious. Like, if he comes in with like full fuel with all of his weapons on and he has the drop tank and then he deploys his air brake, like, cool, now you got something to work with. You can do some shit. Like, right here, I think I'm gonna like do some kind of cooking with my power to weight ratio and go up, because maybe people let some energy, and the 0.9 thrust to weight ratio would be something that you can utilize against it. And the answer is like, no, not really. No, not really at all. Now there is one way. It's really stupid, and it does work, but as far as this being like repeatable in enduring confrontation, no, it doesn't. Because if you do this, so what I'm doing is I just go in and I just start going up. I'm just going to use the fact that I merge super fast, and I have a plane that has stupid power to weight ratio, and I'm going to stay outside of his gun range. I'm going to try to stay outside of where he can shoot a missile from by pulling and managing my turn, and I'm eventually going to stall him out, but he's still going to be able to shoot a 9M at me, and I'm going to panic flare it and hope to fucking God it misses, and I get lucky, and yeah, cool, it does. And I'm up here at 7,000 meters, and he's 2,000 meters below me, and I'm going to nose over, and I'm going to be able to shoot him. But if you do this shit in EC, what's going to happen is some bozo in a flanker, some bozo in an F-15. It doesn't matter what plane you do this in. If you're going to try to do the same kind of trap, you're going to most likely eat a radar missile. You're going to eat a radar missile either at the top here, or by the time you try to get back to the ground, you probably already have a couple of radar missiles coming at you. So it's not really something that's like, it's not really exploitable. It means that fighting against the Griffin is cock and ball torture.